statement by the DGMOs of Pakistan and India in February 2021 has raised hope for a much-awaited thaw in otherwise very tense relations between the two nuclear neighbors. Bilateral relations have been at their lowest for the past several years, especially since the 2019 Balakot crisis and India's August 5th decision to revoke Article 370 and 35A. For a very long time, the dialogue process remained stalled as the New Delhi showed complete disinterest in any engagement with Islamabad over the alleged terrorism charges against the latter. And following India's August 5th decision, Pakistan too had put the condition of reinstatement of Jammu and Kashmir special status for any talks to take place. Despite these hardened positions, recent developments indicate that a mutually conducive back-channel process has been and is underway. If these trends continue, one hopes that India and Pakistan may be on the verge of another rapprochement. However, this optimism is overshadowed by genuine skepticism as well and raises obvious questions, such as, is this the right moment for peace in South Asia? Will this process be just another series of confidence-building measures, or will it pave the way for a comprehensive dialogue on all security issues between India and Pakistan? And thirdly, is there a genuine and mutual will on both sides of the border to take the process to the logical next step and open ways for regional cooperation and development? The webinar aims to take stock of potential obstacles and roadblocks in the way of potential rapprochement and make a dispassionate assessment of available options and choices for peace in the region. And for this very purpose, we have a very eminent group of experts with us today. I warmly welcome our worthy panelists today, who certainly need no introduction, as we are joined by Ms. Hina Rabbani Kar, the former Foreign Minister of Pakistan and currently a member of National Assembly, Dr. Happymon Jacob, Associate Professor at the prestigious Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, India, and Ambassador Jalil Abbas Jilani, the former Foreign Secretary of Pakistan and currently Director at Center for Aerospace and Security Study. The format of today's session is interactive. I'll request each speaker to offer their initial remarks for about 5 minutes on these questions that I've just elaborated, and that will be followed by an interactive discussion. In order to ensure that we have sufficient time for the question and answer session for the audience, I'll request the worthy speakers to be mindful of the time. The audience can use the question and answer tab to post their questions, and I'll try to incorporate as many questions as I can. I'll begin this discussion with Ms. Hina Rabbani. Ms. Kar, your term as a foreign minister was best remembered for the regional pivot to Pakistan's foreign policy. And as a foreign minister of Pakistan, you concentrated on building ties with Pakistan's immediate neighborhood, and as a major policy shift, started trade relations with India. How do you see this current round of cordiality in the backdrop of rather strict national positions on the broader issues? Is this really a right moment for peace? And do you see that natural, genuine and a mutual will on both sides? Over to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. And I don't know, this general cordiality that you're referring to seems to be like the emperor's new clothes. I cannot see them. Only some people who perhaps feel like they have engineered this cordiality can see it, because all I have seen, and you refer to our term, the Pakistan People's Party's term in the Foreign Office and in Pakistan's government. So we left office in 2013, right? So from there to now, as a generation, perhaps older than you, certainly, but as a generation that was born post-1971, and as perhaps the first foreign minister who was from a generation that was born post-1971, I thought we had truly turned a new leaf, and that some sort of consistency and persistence in this new trend that we thought we'd started would continue. And what was the new trend? I believe very strongly in any negotiation, in any smart diplomacy, holding to your old positions, which may not hold true in current environment, is not smart diplomacy. Smart diplomacy is that, you know, even if you go further back, what is the purpose of a country's foreign policy? If not to serve the people of that country. So if your foreign policy is about getting a seat on the table, etc., but not converting and translating into serious benefits for the people of that country, then you might as well not, you know, shut down your foreign office, because your foreign office cannot be there to serve others' interests. It has to be there to serve your own interests. So unfortunately, since 2013 till now, I have see nothing to celebrate, and I cannot be diplomatic about it. I cannot mince my words in saying that. And I think for that reason, some historical perspective on India and Pakistan is always necessary, though I know an audience such as yours, people such as you already know the history, right? But the point is that if Pakistan and India are always, there is the elephant in the room, it is Kashmir, it is a reality, it cannot be done away with. It is not based on the whims and wishes of the Pakistani people or the Pakistani state or the Pakistani military or the Pakistani Foreign Office. It is based on strong resolutions within the only real, international order stabilizing body that we know, which is the United Nations, and none other than the Security Council of the United Nations. Also, do not forget, I think a lot of us do not know, a lot of people in my generation and below, perhaps don't remember that it was India which went to the UN on this dispute and asked the UN to intervene, and not Pakistan. And then the UN intervened and told us, but that's too far into history. It is important to mention that because many a youth in Pakistan and India believe that Pakistan and India inherited their problems when the British colonialism ended. The British left us with this basket of problems. And my question, even as foreign minister, and even today, unfortunately, the questions haven't changed. And my question is that as two peoples of two important states, of two populated states, of two states which have much to worry about, I think COVID has exposed many things that India claimed to do, right? Pakistan faced many internal economic and other challenges itself. We continue to host one of the largest population of the poor in the world, and yet we think we have money for, to waste on tanks and military fare and technology on that front, rather than technology and education and health and taking care of our people better. So it is choices that we make. So from the basket of problems that the British gave to us, my question to us ourselves is, did we increase the problems in that basket, or did we make that basket light? And unfortunately, forget everything else. You start from Siachen, Samjhota Express, Pulwama, Mumbai. These are all problems which were created post, okay? Sir Creek and Siachen, a big one, a territorial one. Now, Sir Creek and Siachen are two problems which, frankly speaking, if the will exists at any time, at the same time, in the two countries, it is a done deal. It can be done within minutes. It can be done within days, okay? And Sitara, one thing which haunts me and, should haunt everybody who has ever held any office or continues to hold office in South Asia, in India and in Pakistan, is that what is the cost of lack of decision-making? In our tenure as foreign minister, we had an episode in Siachen where about almost 200 of our soldiers were, martyred because of avalanche. This was not Indian fire. I know that many Indian soldiers also die because of exceptionally difficult circumstances and conditions that we expose them to. Now, is that a sacrifice which is fair of them to ask of our own soldiers? Is there not a solution that can be found? And as someone who remembers the word of Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, who said he would like to convert Siachen in the Mountain of Peace during his tenure, and as someone who remembers that when Pakistan went back to him, he said the timing was perhaps not right because of how the streets in India were behaving. The litany, the beads of missed opportunities between India and Pakistan in being so close to resolving starts perhaps even prior to that. But I remember from Swaran Singh and Bhutto dialogue, 5 rounds, to Benazir Bhutto, Rajiv Gandhi dialogue, almost initial the Siachen document, to the Musharraf Vajpayee and then Musharraf Manmohan Singh and then our term and Manmohan Singh dialogue, in which every time we thought we were just on the cusp of it. And I would just, because I think I've already gone over my 5 minutes, I'm just going to end by saying that you need to, why I said that smart diplomacy means that you're able to leave some positions. So for instance, in our term, we were able to leave the position that Pakistan will not trade until and unless Kashmir was not normalized, right? Or a resolution to the Kashmir problem was not there. That was the time to be able to do it. And we could have built, and we did build, the ground support for that, the popular support for that, right? If anyone thinks that this is the time to be able to sell it to the Pakistanis after Article 370's repealment, after re-annexation of Kashmir, after letting Kashmir burn and brutalization and human rights violation to the extent where, rape becomes a weapon, where people's eyesights are taken away, people are not allowed to lead normal life, even during the pandemic where they do not have internet service to be able to even get healthcare throughout that time. Now, if a rapprochement ought to happen, if normalization beyond LoC normalization ought to happen, then India will have to reverse its position. And anyone who believes that Pakistan will be able to go forward through back channel, through right channel, left channel, forward channel, without consideration from India on what it did in August 2019, or reversal, or starting the process of reversal, I think we are being delusional. I think the streets of Pakistan would never support it. More importantly, I think the state of it does not suit the state of Pakistan, because India broke all records. And I do not want to go into the record of Mr. Modi and all that he's done prior to that, post that, and how he built his base on this rightist, anti-Muslim sentiment, and how he continues to benefit from it. I think it's happening all over the world. Modi happens to be no exception, but it is the Indian people who suffer. I used to call out India as a good example within South Asia of a liberal country, of a secular country, of a country where democratic institutions are strong. Now, India comes back to us as a haunting example of what not to do.
Thank you, Ms. Khan, for a very realistic and I would say rather pessimistic view, but perhaps that's how the situation is. I'll now turn to Dr. Happymon Jacob. Professor Jacob, your book, Line on Fire, Ceasefire Violations and India-Pakistan Escalation Dynamics, is one of the most authoritative books on the subject. And post-February, I've been keenly following your take on this issue, and one of your podcasts in The Wire, while commenting on the ceasefire agreement, you stated that this is the proof that countries cannot be run by grandstanding alone, and realism requires reason. So how far do you think this reason will prevail in India? As Ms. Kher rightly pointed out, that India, it onus lies on India now. So can we expect a positive surprise from Prime Minister Modi, especially on Kashmir, that can kickstart this process? Or is there a possibility or the way forward that can happen in terms of reversing the Article 370 in India?
Thank you, Sitara. Thank you so much for inviting me to this webinar. Thank you also to Center for Aerospace and Security Studies. I would have loved to be in Islamabad participating in this webinar conference in person, but for, of course, COVID. Hope things get better in the months to come. I'm also delighted to be participating in this panel with former Minister Hina Rabbani Khar and the former Foreign Secretary Jilani Saab. So, I mean, the way I am looking at the ceasefire of 2021 February, I say that the February ceasefire is arguably one of the most significant military measures by India and Pakistan in over 18 years to reduce violence on the line of control. In fact, we just marked 3 months of the ceasefire agreement, and there has been very little. In fact, I think there has been no firing on the line of control at all in the last 3 months, which is significant, because if we actually go back to 2020, 2020 actually had more ceasefire violations than, say, in the last 16 years. Only, I think, topped by 2000, the firing 2003 or 2002. So I think the fact that ceasefire has held and we have achieved a ceasefire is itself a great achievement. Let me quickly sort of try and go to the current state of the bilateral relations. And I think sitting here in Delhi in June 2021, it so seems to me that India-Pakistan relations have been frozen in time and put on a back burner by the two sides with a certain amount of mutual understanding. Right. So in my opinion, what we are witnessing is some sort of controlled calm. So what in my opinion are some of the key features of this controlled calm between India and Pakistan? Clearly, this controlled calm or the relations between India and Pakistan is bereft of any goodwill towards each other, bereft of any major engagement with each other, and bereft of any keen desire towards conflict resolution. So as we say, about Western food in South Asia, there is very little masala in the relations for this time, good masala or bad masala. So this absence of goodwill, engagement, or conflict resolution also makes this calm a very fragile calm, as it were, if I may sort of put it that way. There is very little clarity in India or in Pakistan. If I sort of venture out to sort of speculate about the next steps, primarily because of the COVID pandemic at this point of time. Both, I think, are India's and Pakistan's political and diplomatic capital is deployed to take care of the current crisis. Right. So, what is gratifying, perhaps, in all of this bad news, perhaps I didn't say it's bad news entirely. Controlled calm is better than a lot of violence happening on the line of control and in Kashmir. So what is perhaps gratifying in my understanding is that both sides seem to appreciate the situation very well. That the priority on both sides, both in Pakistan and in India at the moment, is to sort of deal with COVID and its consequences. As I said earlier, there is very little political or diplomatic capital or attention that the two sides will be able to spare in the foreseeable future to get into a dialogue process, either comprehensive or peaceful. So foreseeable in the foreseeable future, therefore, what we are, well, I think this sort of state of affairs is likely to continue. Pakistan will be busy with COVID and its economic consequences, Afghanistan, and resetting its relationship with the United States. India will be busy with COVID and its economic and humanitarian impact, China, and the Indo-Pacific, as it were, geopolitically speaking. Right. So while this scenario that I just sort of painted for you might look disappointing, I would say that this is some kind of progress compared to what we have been witnessing for several years now. So we are perhaps on to a good start, just a start, but a carefully put together, carefully calibrated beginning, as it were. So under these circumstances today, comparatively speaking, I think this is the best outcome perhaps possible today. Now, let me very briefly talk a little bit about, and I have 1 or 2 minutes left, about the back channel conversation. And Jilani Sahib is here. He knows more about the India-Pakistan back channel perhaps than I would ever know. But I think the current informal back channel, which gets activated when needed, has also been a useful sort of tool, as it were. So unlike the previous back channels, of course, this is not a formal one. There is no designated individual or regularity built into it, but it has achieved a very important outcome, which is the ceasefire itself. Right. So in my opinion, if there is a more broad-based bilateral conversation tomorrow, the two sides will have to clearly understanding the thinking on either side. And to that extent, I think the back channel conversation is a very, very important tool. Right. So I think India at this point of time, going forward, would be open to discussing trade and other less difficult issues such as circuit. Now, as for Kashmir, I think the Indian side might want to go slow, and I'm speaking purely as an analyst. But certain things seem to be, in my opinion, clear. When I sort of look at the developments in Delhi, seem to be pretty clear that one, Article 370 is unlikely to be returned to the state of Jammu and Kashmir. And I, for one, also imagine as an analyst again, that Pakistan has never been a great supporter of Article 370 itself. I think Pakistani concern was more about, and I don't want to be speaking for Pakistan, but I just sort of give an analytical perspective. That was more about the statehood than Article 370 itself. But I think there is a real possibility today that the statehood would be returned to Jammu and Kashmir as part of a negotiated process. Right. So the feeling that I am getting from Pakistan, notwithstanding what Prime Minister Imran Khan said today, which is there is no going back without the Indian side reversing its 2019 August moves. The feeling that I get in at least some track to conversations is that there is a certain amount, if there is a certain amount of normalcy in Kashmir, Islamabad might be open to talks with India, and Article 370 may not be a big hindrance, provided there is, of course, calm and normalcy. Normalcy is a lot of word here, but calm and the statehood is returned. I think the immediate next steps we can probably talk about in the conversation as to what I think should be the next steps in this relationship. But I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Sitara.
Thank you, Professor Jacob, for giving your perspective. And now with that, I'll turn to Ambassador Jilani, and who is certainly most suitable to assess the given question, as he has closely observed the ebb and flows of India-Pakistan relations as a career diplomat. Success of the peace process, especially the resolution of the Kashmir dispute, would involve support of the Kashmiris from both sides of the line of control, Ambassador Jilani. And as Dr. Jacob rightly, or in his opinion, as he stated, or giving point of view on India's position, that Article 370 is unlikely to go away, but probably there might be some steps on that regard, which might, kind of provide an conducive environment. So do you think that with the August 5 related Indian actions, detentions, and massive violations on human rights, they could become part of the process? Or how do we raise the comfort of the Kashmiris to become part of the peace process? As Dr. Jacob alluded, that probably reversal of Article 370 would not be possible. Short of that, how can Kashmiris be made comfortable about any potential way forward? Ambassador Jilani, you have to unmute yourself, please.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It's a great honor to be sharing this panel with two of my distinguished friends and former Foreign Minister Hina Rabbani Kar and Happy Jacob. I have the highest respect and regards for Foreign Minister Hina Rabbani Kar. I work very closely with her, and I can tell you that she gave a new direction to our foreign policy, which was innovative and result-oriented. Talking about Pakistan-India relations, I would say that it is certainly a sad situation. And I agree with Foreign Minister Hina Rabbani Kar that despite the lapse of more than 7 decades, we continue to have unresolved issues, disputes, and we have a history of mistrust, hostility, and lost opportunities. The kind of situation that we are in that raises many questions in the minds of people from both India and Pakistan, as well as policymakers at the international level. Are India and Pakistan destined to remain adversaries forever? So this is a question that certainly needs to be addressed with all the seriousness that we have at all levels. Having dealt with Pakistan-India relations for almost half of my diplomatic service, I can tell you that the issues between India and Pakistan are not insurmountable. Despite hostility, despite tension that we have had between our two countries, we have been able to resolve some of the difficult issues between our two countries. And when we launched this peace process between India and Pakistan in 2003 to 2007, we were discussing the resolution of rather more difficult issues between our two countries, whether it was the Jammu and Kashmir dispute, whether it was Siachen Glacier issue or Sir Creek or water issues, or for that matter, terrorism that we have. And let me tell you that the discussions that took place between our two countries, we made significant progress and we were close to resolution of the disputes. Unfortunately, the process was disrupted because of the judicial crisis in Pakistan, as well as the Mumbai terrorist attacks in 2008. This ceasefire that was announced in February this year between the Directors General of Military Operations of the two countries, it is certainly a very, very positive development from our point of view, because it has rekindled hopes amongst the people of the two countries that at least a beginning has been made after a gap of so many years between our two countries, in which there was absolutely no discussion taking place at any level to resolve or to lower the temperature between our two countries. So it is certainly a positive development there. And we need to build on this positive development. But again, I would say that what is needed is a political will at the highest level, support of the political parties, civil societies, and media. And we also need the support of the international community, because If we look at the past, international community members, particularly the United States of America and UK, played a significant role in diffusing tension between the two countries and also in moving forward the peace process between our two sides. For the peace process to become meaningful, I was just thinking that if Prime Minister Modi could follow the footsteps of his predecessor, Prime Minister Vajpayee, perhaps things could move forward in a much better fashion. I recall that in April of 2003, Prime Minister Vajpayee, during his visit to Indian-occupied Kashmir, made a very important statement. While addressing the Kashmiris, he said that we would like to resolve the Kashmir dispute in accordance with Insaniyat and Jamhuriyat. And I think that is the kind of spirit that we need to bring back in the body politic of India. Secondly, I think it is extremely important that the political parties also, they should distance themselves from, they should refrain from making Pakistan-India issues as electoral issues. Unfortunately, what we are witnessing in India is that during election times, or perhaps throughout India is one country where elections are taking place, perhaps throughout the year, one way or the other. But every time an election takes place, Pakistan-India issues and disputes, they also become electoral issues. Unlike India, in Pakistan, we see that political parties do not make Pakistan-India issue, or India for that matter, an electoral issue. And that is something that has been taking place for a very long time. What is needed, lastly, I would say that what is needed is that we need to learn from our mistakes from the past. And this goes for both our countries. I think we need to realize that war is not an option between our two countries. We cannot achieve peace by brushing aside difficult issues, because it is because of the difficult issues like Kashmir, Siachen, water issues, that whatever progress is made between our two countries is also retarded because of these important issues. Thirdly, I think we need to, and as rightly mentioned by Foreign Minister Hina Rabbani Khan, we need to overcome this wooden-headed approach that we have followed in order to resolve our disputes for the last many years. I think we need to look at the realities. We need to come up with some innovative ways to resolve these issues. Terrorists and their supporters, they thrive in an atmosphere of tension between countries. This is a phenomenon that needs to be discouraged. And if I recall correctly, there was an understanding between India and Pakistan at some stage that terrorist incidents would not be allowed to derail the peace process between India and Pakistan. And I think one way to discourage extremists and terrorists is to continue with to revive the spirit of that agreement that had taken place in the past. We should not allow these terrorist incidents to derail the process. And then India will have to basically work together to meet their economic objectives, because economic ambitions can also not be met. You, Sitara, raised a very important question, involvement of Kashmiris. I cannot visualize a solution of the Jammu and Kashmir dispute without involving the Kashmiris, and we have been able to involve the Kashmiris in a dialogue process during 2003 and 2007 peace process. Kashmiris were regularly consulted from both sides of the line of control, both by India as well as in Pakistan. As a matter of fact, the Indian side had allowed the Kashmiris from Hurriyat leaders from across the line of control to visit Pakistan to consult with Pakistani politicians, Pakistani civil society, and Pakistani media. And we came very close to coming up with an interim solution of the whole issue. I'll stop here, and perhaps during the interactive session, I could respond to some more of these questions in case there are any. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador Jilani. You have raised a very important point, and particularly highlighting that the issues between India and Pakistan are not surmountable. I mean, that's something every one of us need to keep in mind. But and you also highlighted that we need to build on these developments. And but in order to, and I would probably go back to Ms. Hina Rabbani-Khar, taking this question forward, this comment forward. In order to build upon these developments that Ambassador Jilani referred to, success of any process requires statesmanship and an ability to take bold decision. Ms. Khar, with your experience as a foreign minister and as an observer of the foreign policy right now as things are unfolding, what kind of flexibility and looking forward approach needs to be adopted by the leadership on both sides? And in your opening remarks, you rightly stated that a lot has changed in India. Environment has, I think, space for peace has shrunk significantly. At this time and space, considering how important it is to, at least bring some stability in the region, considering the risks that we face as the two nations. So, what in your view can be that flexible approach, to move forward?
Well, look, the flexibility in any approach is the flexibility, right? And it could vary from very low to very high, but or anywhere in the middle. I think what has always been required historically, what will be required today, and what will be required in the future, is the ability of the two leaders, whoever is leading in both the countries, to in tandem at the same time feel like they want their place in history as a statesman, and they want posterity to remember the role that they played as the solver of problems rather than the creator of problems. Okay, the last important event before COVID hit all of us, as in the pandemic hit the world, was a Munich Security Conference, which I attended. And over there, I remember when this question was raised on the side event, and this question of what can India do and what is India doing? My point over there is the same, and unfortunately it hasn't changed, that it's not only Prime Minister Modi. If you look all over the world, at that time there was President Trump in the USA also. If you look in Austria, if you look within Germany, post-Merkel, we know that there's a strong chance that more right-wing type of entities may emerge. Many European countries, what UK did to itself, there are emerging leaders within the world which are convincing people or giving to people exceptionally harmful things for their own country and selling them as something that is good for them, right? And in that way, they are just serving their own self-interest, because they're always trying to appease this constituency, this right-wing constituency, and then trying to appease the right-wing constituency, they're actually enlarging the scope and the numbers of the right wing, and therefore changing forever the nature of that country. Now, I feel that Pakistan has gone through that during the 80s, during the Zia regime, during the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, and how Pakistan and the US and everyone reacted to the coming of the Mujahideen, etc. Now, we could not, when we wanted to even, get out of that extremist mindset, right? And it took us 2 decades of sacrifices of our soldiers, policemen, of our civilians, of our children, to be able to reach a point where today we can perhaps, claim some victory and say, yes, we are existing within the country peacefully. So what Prime Minister Modi is doing to India is in many ways similar. And India will not be able to just all of a sudden press a button and get out of it. So right now, the direction that India has taken, unfortunately, makes an absolutely indefatigable optimist like me a pessimist. And I would not call myself a pessimist. I would just, looking at reality, I can't look at anything else. And I remember when Prime Minister Modi first came into power, I happened to be in India at that time for a young global leader event. And I remember giving an interview to Karan Thapar, and he said, should your Prime Minister, at that time, Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif had been invited by Prime Minister Modi to come for his inauguration. And he said, should he come or should he not come? And I said, I don't know what my party position is, but I absolutely believe that he should come, because we have to forget the past of Chief Minister Modi and congratulate and look forward to Prime Minister Modi, who may follow the footsteps of what Ambassador Jalil also mentioned of, in fact, Foreign Secretary Jalil also mentioned of Prime Minister Vajpayee, because Vajpayee also represented the right wing, but he wanted to do what was right for this country. So in a very long, convoluted way, I guess what I'm trying to say is that the will has to exist in the leader to do what is right for the country, not what might be popular in the country. And unfortunately, it has to exist at both sides at the same time. Now, the whole line of efforts which have been made, other than a few, barring a few, where something or the other would come up, when the will existed in one country, it did not exist in the other. But right now, we're talking about something even far more dangerous than what I'm referring to, because right now you have a leader in India who is very keen to create this issue further, to create these fissures, this animosity, this hatred against Pakistan, because it serves his internal, his self-interest, his electioneering and his populism. And he's willing to, in some ways, in my mind, I'm going to say this very clearly, he's willing to sacrifice the future of India for his own personal future.
Thank you, Ms. Kar. And I think I would pose the same question to Mr. Happymon as well. And, as Ms. Hena has alluded to, that populist approach in the leadership is probably becoming detrimental to peace. And in her previous remark, as you also said, that probably there are some lower hanging fruits already. As you mentioned and referred that probably reversing Article 370 would not be possible. Are there some other tangible measures or other lower hanging fruits such as Siachen and Sirkri, which can actually are just waiting some, decision from the leadership? Otherwise, there are no technicalities involved. Do you think there can be some approach from the Indian side for the sake of peace? Because once we talk about the current, wave of cordiality, if we may call it so, definitely there are behind the scenes some pressures and some, elements are moving, be it an external pressure, be it some internal government's attempt to deflect attention from the failure in Kashmir policy, the human rights violation in Kashmir, and external pressure to, deflect that external pressure. How do you see that? Is there some will on Indian side or Indian leadership to show some flexibility or, take things forward?
Thank you, Sitara, for that question. I mean, on the issue of leaderships, my own feeling is that, listen, whether or not we like the leadership on the other side, we got to learn to deal with them. And the one lesson, and I'm a student of international politics, the one lesson that I take from the Cold War is the fact that these were ideological rivals, United States and Soviet Union. They learned to live with each other. They learned to sort of negotiate with each other. The amount of negotiations that the two sides had during Cold War, reaching all kinds of treaties, arms control treaties, CBMs, whatnot, is amazing. I think there is a certain lesson that we have to learn from that. It doesn't matter who is in power on the other side. Negotiation is possible. I think that is the beauty of diplomacy, as it were. Now, I mean, coming to Mr. Modi, Prime Minister Modi, let me put it this way. I think it is sometimes we are a bit too uncharitable towards his moves towards Pakistan. Let's go back to the chronology a bit. 2014, Mr. Modi comes to power. Whether or not someone likes it, Mr. Modi invited all the SAARC leaders to come for his swearing in Delhi, and Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif did come for that swearing in ceremony. I thought that was an excellent beginning. You then have in 2015, he makes a visit to Pakistan, including his own party members in India, BJP. Some of the BJP members were very unhappy about the fact that Mr. Modi went to Pakistan in 2015, but he did go, and he had a good, relationship going with Mr. Nawaz Sharif. And thereafter, we have the Pathankot attack in the January of 2016. Mr. Modi, after the attack takes place, says, all right, let us have investigation into the airbase attack in Pathankot. He invited the Pakistani investigation team to visit Pathankot, and he said, and the Pakistani side was supposed to give an invitation back to the Indian investigation authorities, which never came in 2016. And I think after the Uri attack in September 2016, things started going south. So, you know, in all analytical clarity, it is important, sincerity, it is important to say that Mr. Modi started out well with Pakistan, and there is no going back on it. I mean, if we were to sort of continue to look at the other side and the leadership as a major stumbling block, you know, what is the traditional Indian stand about Pakistan? That the Pakistan army uses the India bogey, so that the Pakistan army can continue to stay in power in Pakistan. I think these tropes will not let us move forward. I do agree that you know, India is a democracy, and because there are elections, and sometimes you know, foreign policy gets played out, and some of us are very critical about that, right? So if Pakistan is a foreign policy issue in India, in the Indian elections, in domestic politics, Kashmir is a domestic political issue for Pakistan. So I think there is no point in going back and forth on that. What Ambassador Jilani, Foreign Secretary Jilani, said very interestingly, 2003 to 2007. And I have had a lot of conversations with Foreign Secretary Jilani on what happened, and I am amazed at the fact that and Hinaji also mentioned about the talks, the 5 rounds of talks between Swaran Singh and Bhutto in the early 1960s. I think that is the way to take. Who would have imagined that Atal Bihari Vajpayee in 2003 and Manmohan Singh in 2004 would have negotiated a deal with, close to almost finalized deal with Musharraf, who India considered to be a backstabber in 1999 in the Kargil conflict. So I think it sometimes you know, leaders can surprise us, and I think Mr. Modi did surprise in the beginning. And now coming back to your question, Sitara, I don't want to take too much time. I think as far as the low-hanging fruits are concerned, Minister Khare is absolutely right. I think Sir Creek is the low-hanging fruit. I am not so sure about, unfortunately, about Siachen. I think you know, that is perhaps not a very low-hanging fruit at this point of time. But certainly Siachen, certainly Sir Creek is. I think having the High Commissioners back in office in India and Pakistan should be our first step. I think the first immediate step was having that ceasefire in place. I think that was a tactical measure. That has happened. Now the High Commissioner should be sent back to Islamabad and New Delhi. We should try and have a written down ceasefire agreement, because the verbal ceasefire agreement between the DGMOs will not last too long. If we, I mean, if we look at the example of 2003, we should start with the Wagah-Atari trade resumption. And I think there was some good beginning made in Pakistan when there was some discussion about the possibility of opening trade with India. I think that should be back in place. The LoC trade between India and Pakistan in Kashmir should also begin. I think there are a lot of things that can sort of take this conversation and this relationship to the next level. I don't think it is possible at this point of time. I think these are baby steps at this point of time. At this point of time, one step at a time. And I think we will get to perhaps where we left off in 2007, mid 2007, as far as the peace process is concerned. Thank you, Sitara.
Yes, Dr. Jacob, I think I tend to agree when you say that perhaps this is not the right time to take, you know, some major steps. And with that, I would take forward this question to Ambassador Jilani as we discuss the possibility and impossibility of certain developments, further developments taking place. I think one important element that becomes a hindrance in that process is the strong negative perceptions about each other in both countries, at the public level as well as the political level. And such negative perceptions are detrimental to the success of the process. So what do you think would be required to overcome these negative trends? Particularly, you see, in India, perhaps this has become even more challenging, as this has become important tool in election as well. The anti-Pakistan narrative has been used quite frequently as an election winning slogan. So how do you see? I mean, that's true that probably some things both countries need to take some few steps back, and then we enter into something positive. But how do you see that situation going forward? And as Dr. Happy Moon Jacob pointed out, some steps forward, which in your view could be the next possible steps as we go forward?
Well, Sitara, I would first of all like to respond to what Happy mentioned.
Mhm.
He talked about the timing of taking difficult, steps on difficult issues. I think both India and Pakistan, we got caught in this quagmire because of our shyness to take on difficult issues between our two countries. I think there is time for India and Pakistan to seriously discuss how to resolve difficult issues between our two countries. We have a model to follow. I think there are certain steps which are needed in order to take on those difficult issues between our two countries. And those steps certainly include, as I mentioned earlier, political commitment on the part of the two sides. Bold decisions. Prime Minister Modi remains extremely popular in India. He has the ability to take bold decisions on his side. On our side, the current government can also take bold decisions because of a number of factors which go to their advantage. Secondly, I think by taking this baby step, I think we need to, of ceasefire. Ceasefire is something that we had taken earlier as well. We decided to announce ceasefire in September of 2003, but then the ceasefire was followed up by a result-oriented peace process between our two countries. Political will, and then the decision to start a peace process, something which is very, very important. Thirdly, I think it is extremely important that we formalize the ceasefire, because unless we formalize the ceasefire in some kind of a verifiable agreement, ceasefire alone, a declaration is not going to serve a significant purpose, because one inadvertent shot being fired from one side can trigger a volley of fires from the other side. So this is something that we have to be watchful of. And then I think the restoration of status quo ante, it's not something which is difficult, because I realize, and I agree with Happy Mon, that it may not be possible for Prime Minister Modi to reverse this decision because of the political implications and the fallout of that decision. But certainly there are other avenues available for the government to take that route. For instance, the cases are lying pending with the Indian Supreme Court, and a decision can be made by the Supreme Court. And in case this decision is suspended, perhaps things will move forward in a much better fashion. And I think the revival of Kashmir-related CBMs is again something which is also very, very important. Now, with regard to your question about the negative narrative, I think in media in both India and Pakistan, they follow the lines which are given by their respective governments when it comes to Pakistan-India issues. Indian media is as nationalistic as Pakistani media is. But then if a positive statement comes from the leadership of the two countries, media automatically, they sort of begin to highlight positive stories about the respective countries. And I think that is the spirit that we need to follow, in that spirit. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Jilani. At this stage, I would also want to request our audience as well that if you have certain questions, you can post them in the question and answer box. I have already received some questions in this box, and there are some questions that we have received through email. And I think one question that I've asked the earlier panelist, Ms. Hina, I think I'll revert that back to you, looping in another question that I've received from Mr. Mohammed Khan through email. And the question that he has asked is that is the current ceasefire part of the overall strategic shift in Pakistan's policy from geostrategy to geoeconomics, which also calls for regional connectivity integration? If you think that's part of that process, what do you think could be the next logical steps? As I've asked the same question to the other panelists also, what do you think can be the possible doable next steps in that regard? While keeping in view that broader question, is it part of Pakistan's strategy to shift from geostrategy to geoeconomics?
Sorry, is that question then for me?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay. So, Pakistan's strategy from geostrategy to geoeconomics, I think that's a strategy which is perhaps now being articulated more, but has been long in making. And if you remember back in 2013, our push towards normalization of trade with India, with the status quo on Kashmir, was in many ways a very big step. Do not forget that since 1965, there was absolutely no movement towards normalization of trade with India. And in fact, Pakistan did not even given India an MFN status, and India had given Pakistan an MFN status, which meant nothing. So we started on that journey because we believed that countries and states and people should unencumber themselves from their bad historical memories and chart a new path which is based on development and economic coexistence and peaceful coexistence of the people and growth and development of the people. So we were very clear. We continue to be clear today. And that's why, Sidara, I think it's important because, Mr. Jacob is actually an academic par excellence. I read him, I read the articles and books, and obviously Foreign Secretary Jilani, I was fortunate enough that we served together and has served. So it's interesting that you have in this panel a person like me who is, I would like to consider myself politician and more a policymaker than a politician, and then a diplomat, a very seasoned diplomat, and a very good academic. And you're getting a very interesting perspective. I refuse to be optimistic about a situation where we have one step forward and 5 steps backward. I remember in 2013, I used to say 1 step forward and 3 steps or 2 steps backward. Now we have 1 step forward and 5 steps backwards. So when Dr. Jacobs sits there, and as I said, a lot of respect for this, for him as an academic, and everything that he says is always based on facts. And says that, LoC is something, ceasefire on LoC is something really great to celebrate, and that, hopefully, inshallah, we can go forward and perhaps get our high commissioners back. I feel there is absolutely nothing to celebrate in 2 countries which keep on going back tens of years to problematic areas which did not even exist. So from my vantage point, 2013, we were looking forward to resolving the basket of territorial disputes that we had. And here we are today trying to normalize to the extent of having high commissioners serving in each other's countries. That shows what the problem is within the India-Pakistan context. And please do not forget and do not try and undermine the response that has consistently, persistently, and across the board come from Pakistan. For Pakistan, India is not an electoral issue. In Pakistan, everybody, all political parties, including the institutions, want to normalize normalize relations with India. Okay, and trade being eventual part of it. But please try and I have, as foreign minister, spoken, very, very positively about Prime Minister Vajpayee, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, and perhaps even the Indian institutions and the Indian democratic model, etc. We are not one of those people who want to be antagonistic towards India. We supported lack of antagonism against India. And I think Foreign Secretary Jilani would remember where Foreign Minister Krishna was on a visit to Islamabad, and a reporter, a very acclaimed, so to speak, reporter, tried to, snub him and treat him not so well during the press conference. And I, as Foreign Minister of Pakistan, intervened not to defend him, but to put the record straight. Okay, and later on, when that reporter came to me and he said, "Why did you defend him?" I was scoring points for Pakistan. I said, "You are absolutely on the wrong side and making a mistake, because you were not scoring points for Pakistan. You were scoring points against Pakistan, because if he is felt not made to feel good while he's a guest of Pakistan, do you think we'll be able to move on our diplomatic frontier get any forward traction or movement?" So please make no mistake. I'm not one of those people who wants to say, that no opportunity exists because it's an Indian leader. I think with Indian leaders, opportunities always existed. I'm saying the vantage point, the identity that this particular Prime Minister of India has carved for itself takes him away from any peaceful negotiation. His identity is that of a maker vis-a-vis Pakistan. It is something that gets him votes, and he has. And please do not forget Pulwama. If you can't forget Mumbai, we cannot forget Pulwama, where for the first time since 1971, Indian jets came inside Pakistani territory, and then we saw what they got. And then, do you remember? I don't want to go back in, that historical realities, but all I'm saying is that please understand when we say that Prime Minister Modi leaves very little room to maneuver in a diplomatic, forward movement. We are saying that he's an exception to the rule within India. We are saying he's not Nehruvian. We are saying he's not like Manmohan Singh. We are saying he's not like Vajpayee. I would love to be surprised by him. We expected to be surprised by him when he came in. And do not forget when Nawaz Sharif did go as Prime Minister, he was rather not given the same treatment as other Prime Ministers. So instead of it being a goodwill gesture, it turned out to be a tepid, if not a bad sort of a gesture. So bear in mind, if today Prime Minister Modi suddenly transforms himself into a statesman who wants to normalize, and for the sake of his country and ours, and for the region and for the world, these are two nuclear states. Pakistan, you will not see Pakistan falling short of having really, if you're going to be walk towards a peaceful negotiated solution, we're going to sprint towards. We're not even going to run. We're going to sprint towards it. So I think currently we would love to be surprised. Currently, I fear that even this normalization, another opportunity comes for him to score points nationally. I mean, unfortunately, the only normalization we've seen is during the pandemic, because India has been absorbed by whatever has been happening within its boundaries. And as I said, I think if he decides to be a statesman in the last leg of the second tenure, I think you will not find Pakistan wanting.
Thank you, Ms. Sinha, for saying that. And I think I completely share your frustration over when you say that from time in 2013, where we were actually looking at resolution of the core issues, now we have come to the point where we are probably celebrating or are, seeking hopes in something as small as a, ceasefire agreement. But of course, some significant, given the current situation, I think it is a significant step forward. With that, I would turn to Mr. Happy Mount Jacob, and how did you respond to that level of frustration? And as she rightly stated, that probably if there are two steps, and I think this goes again with the policy of the Prime Minister Imran Khan as well, as he says, if India takes one step, we would take two steps. That's precisely what Pakistan have been saying all along. And with that, I'll lump in a question from Air Marshal Ashfaq Arain, in which that's specifically directed to you, Mr. Jacob, in which he says that present Indian government came to office by exploiting anti-Pakistan sentiment and continues to thrive on the same, as I mentioned in the previous question as well. Do you think they would be able to justify change of stance and start peace process with Pakistan? That I want you to see this question in light of what Ms. Thar said just recently.
Right. Thank you so much for that question. I think, India-Pakistan relations, it's a very complicated affair. There are no easy way to analyze it. There are no easy way to sort of try and easy way to understand it. If the opposition, then opposition, Bharatiya Janata Party came to power in India, also riding on an anti-Pakistan wave, there was also certain sentiment within the country after Mumbai that the attacks, those attacks that took place in Mumbai in 2008 have not been accounted for. And the party, and like any political party, the BJP made use of that and came to power. Now, you turn around and ask if that kind of an attack were to take place in any other part of the world, 9/11 in the United States, what did the United States do thereafter? So you have a situation in Mumbai where in broad daylight for 3 days, you have the terrorists attacking the Indian heartland in many ways. So that had a certain public memory. So it is not as if I, as an analyst, can sort of undo that memory from the Indian popular psyche. So clearly, there was a certain anti-Pakistan sort of campaign in India, but there was also a reason behind that. Now, your specific question, Air Marshal, is with regard to whether or not it is possible for the current regime in Delhi to undo that sort of language and go back to a peace process with Pakistan. I think absolutely possible. If I mean, Mr. Modi is, as Jirani Saab correctly pointed out, it's a very, very popular leader in India. He's a strong leader. He's a popular leader. He has a support. If tomorrow he decides that he wants to get into a dialogue process with Pakistan, he will be able to pull it off. And don't dismiss him yet. 3 more years to go. I think it is not impossible that if the back channel conversations take place along the lines that we are told, it's a very positive process that's happening. I wouldn't rule out that possibility at all. And secondly, coming to the larger question that you raised, Sitara, and Madam Hina referred to, and I see where the foreign ministry is coming from. You're right. Although I sort of would like to see it as progress, what we are witnessing is perhaps not so much of a progress. I mean, I see that. That's a big picture sort of an argument, clearly. I mean, look at, while we, India and Pakistan, were fighting with each other, look what Bangladesh has done. They have become an example for the rest of South Asia. I mean, I was just looking at the data in the latest GDP per capita in Bangladesh is 2,227 USD. In Pakistan, it is 1,543. In India, it's 1,947. We are both behind Bangladesh. Despite the fact that we started off very well. Why is that India and Pakistan cannot live in peace? Why can't they trade with each other? Why can't, for a very long time, India and China had issues, and yet we traded with each other close to $100 billion. So I think the point that you made, Madam Khan, that this is 1 step forward and 5 steps backward, I completely agree with you. But let me tell you where I come from when I say that this is some sort of progress. In the year 2020, you were looking at about 5,133 ceasefire violations. And any one who looks at these ceasefire violations would tell us every ceasefire violation is not just one shot. A ceasefire violation could potentially be tens of thousands of shots with all kinds of weaponry in a 24-hour period in a 30 to 40 to 50 kilometer radius. That's a lot of ordnance getting exchanged between the two sides. On the 25th of February 2021, that came to an end. That is progress for me. We were looking at what happened in Balakot. We were looking at the possibility of escalation spiraling out of control between the two sides. Suddenly, there is no talk of escalation. There is no talk of war. There is no talk of things spiraling out of control. That is progress for me. But I completely see where you are coming from. This is not enough. This is not progress. But hey, for me, this is something, 1 step forward. And I hope we are able, the two countries are able to build on this and take the next logical steps. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jacob, for this elaboration. I'll forward Ms. Salma Malik's question to Ambassador Jilani, and this is partially addressed to Ms. Hina Rabbani-Kar as well, that why is there a complete lack of transparency regarding the current dialogue between the two countries, where Pakistanis are very vocal officially about the need for a dialogue? There is no formal response by India, plus no clarity on Kashmir. I think this is perhaps the elephant in the room that Ms. Kar had in the beginning alluded to as well. Ambassador Jilani, could you please take that?
Well, I would say that in response to this question, that transparent dialogue is a formal dialogue between our two countries. So since this is an informal dialogue in which various options for a peace process are explored, it is non-transparent. And in my view, it should remain non-transparent, because reason is that any discussion that takes place between two interlocutors at the back channel, there has to be a certain degree of I would say that confidentiality that has to be maintained in this kind of a dialogue. Otherwise, any discussion that takes place becomes a subject of media discussion, political discussion, and then given the kind of current environment, even some positive ideas which are generated in this kind of a dialogue, they also get lost in this kind of a debate. So I would say that it has to remain discreet. We have had this kind of a dialogue in the past. I think during the 2003 and 2007 peace process, which I had referred to as a model that we, both India and Pakistan, need to follow. We also had a back channel, and in that back channel, we were able to achieve a lot. For instance, I would refer to Srinagar Muzaffarabad bus service. Now, the kind of discussions which were taking place at the back channel level on Srinagar Muzaffarabad bus service, where we wanted to have an arrangement without passports and visas for the Kashmiris to visit each other. So in case those discussions had become a part of public debate, then I'm sure that we would not have reached the kind of a good agreement, which also raised the comfort level of the Kashmiris. Similarly, a lot of good discussion took place on through the back channel process on Kashmir-related CVMs, on substantive issues related to Kashmir. So again, I think those were important and confidential dialogue, which certainly would have come out in case an agreement which was almost ready had taken shape. So I think these are the, even on terrorism, I think the kind of discussions which have been taking place between the two sides, I only wish that those discussions had continued to address the Indian concerns as well as Pakistani concerns. In case India has concerns with regard to the activities of certain extremist organizations, Pakistan too have concerns with regard to, and we were able to establish a very good back channel to address that particular issue also. And I think, again, Happy Moon Jacob would also bear me out that based on the kind of inputs provided by Pakistan, India was able to kind of take action before a terrorist attack could take place. So these intelligence level contacts are also very important between our two countries.
Ambassador Jilani, there is another question posed to you that I have received through email. This is from Air Marshal Masood Akhtar. He says that why did we shift Kashmir from multilateralism to bilateralism in 1999? He says that we have never explained that to the nation till today, and in writing, it's no more a core issue, but has become part of 5 to 6 broad issues that India, Pakistan intend to resolve. So why is there shift from Kashmir being core issue to become, part of issues, part of the problems, some other problems?
No, even I would say that even when we were having bilateral discussions on the issue of Jammu and Kashmir, the idea was to come up with some out-of-the-box solutions to break the log jam, to come up with a solution which is acceptable to the Kashmiris, to India and Pakistan. And based on our experience of dealing with these issues, I have absolutely no doubt that a solution, a lasting solution would only come about in case it is acceptable to the three parties. And Kashmiris are an important party to this conflict, India as well as Pakistan. But at the same time, the international resolution, this UN Security Council resolutions, they remain the basic framework under which those discussions were taking place. We had never put those UN Security Council resolutions aside. Even when we were talking about these a possible solution that both the countries were going to make in 2007, even that solution was an interim solution. And the basic parameters of that solutions were also the UN Security Council resolutions. What the UN Security Council resolution was saying that India and Pakistan should seek a solution which is acceptable to the people of Kashmir, and the kind of arrangement that we were going to come up with, that certainly enjoyed the endorsement of the Kashmiris as well as all the political parties in India and Pakistan. So the UN Security Council resolution, they They were relevant in the past. They provided a basic framework, and they continue to hold the same kind of sanctity as was the case earlier.
Thank you, Ambassador Jilani. We are nearing the close to the time, but I'll just quickly take another round of questions from the audience. And there is this question from Rishab Yadav, and he's asking that will situation in Afghanistan post-US troops withdrawal complicate or affect normalization dialogue between India and Pakistan? Ms. Zina, if you could please answer that question. How the US withdrawal or the situation in Afghanistan would impact the region overall and India, Pakistan specifically?
Yes, you see, meaning it depends on which lens you're looking at it from. So Afghanistan is obviously a huge concern and a realistic concern to Pakistan, because we share thousands of kilometers border with them. We hosted and continue to host millions of their refugees, and any instability over there, any warfare over there, any terrorist attacks over there have an direct impact permeating through the borders into Pakistan. And we've witnessed that, we've lived through it, unfortunately. Now, India obviously is also part of the larger region, as we call it. So within the regional context, India's concerns, for Afghanistan would be legitimate. And Pakistan, obviously, as a neighbor and as a country which has had a direct impact of whatever instability has happened in Afghanistan, has greater concerns. We also know, and Pakistan has been very transparent about it, that there have been immense concerns in Pakistan about India using using Afghanistan as a platform to launch attacks within Pakistan. And that obviously we have shared the documentations with international organizations and also bilaterally with the Indians. Now, I think Afghanistan presents a great opportunity to be able to get out of the guards that we have historically worn, where we look at everything from an enemy perspective, right? And perhaps look at Afghanistan as a common, problem for the entire region right now, and stop using Afghanistan to attack each other in any way. As I said, as foreign minister, I have seen, unfortunately, documents which I cannot disregard in terms of India using Afghanistan as a launchpad. Now, it's exceptionally important when the US troop withdrawal is continuing to happen. We see that there are strains within the Afghan government. There are strains within, the territory that the Afghan government has. Now, it is what the entire region wants for Afghanistan should be identical to what Pakistan wants for Afghanistan, because all we want in Afghanistan is peace and stability, so that there is no spillover effect from there into Pakistan and the region. So I think this does present an opportunity if you're able to take away our historical desire to hurt each other and using different countries to reach that objective, and really start a new chapter, because Afghanistan, I think, is a country, as the US troops withdrawal happens, the excuse of foreign troops presence for the entire region ceases to exist. So it really does, in the challenges that it presents, it still also presents many opportunities. Iran, China, India, Pakistan, of course, more so than anyone else. And of course, the TAN countries will all have immense stakes in how Afghanistan evolves.
Thank you, Ms. Sina. Mr. Jacob, you have two questions. One from Mr. Khalid Rahim, who asks that India-Pakistan relation is the acceptance or non-acceptance of umbilical cord cut on August 14, 1947. And if I could link it together, I mean, they are separate questions, but if you could just quickly take on what Ms. Salma Malik has asked, that do you feel that the current regime has fully run its ultra-nationalist agenda, or more is to come? I mean, basically, would there be some flexibility on the part of the regime, or would there be, it would get worse before it gets better kind of question? If you could quickly answer to that.
I didn't quite get the first question, sorry.
It says that India-Pakistan relation is the acceptance or non-acceptance of the umbilical cord cut on the August 14, 1947. It's
Well, I mean, if I understand that question correctly, I think the umbilical cord is cut. India and Pakistan are independent sovereign nations, and I think we should deal with each other as independent sovereign states. I think sometimes people miss out on realizing that when we talk about peace between India and Pakistan, we are not really talking about having to go back to that unified sort of India or anything of that kind. We are simply saying that we need to sort of deal with each other as neighbors. We need to deal with each other with certain amount of respect and sort of resolve our problems. That's what is required. And I think there's a lot of promise between India and Pakistan if we were to be serious about negotiating our differences and reaching an outcome. As for Salma's question, well, I think each country has its own peculiar domestic politics, and I don't want to sit in judgment of the peculiar domestic politics that happens in Pakistan or in any other neighboring country. What matters to me is whether there is a certain amount of desire and capacity to in the government in office at the moment to negotiate a deal with deal on the outstanding issues. And as I have explained earlier, history tells me, at least Modi's first term, the example from the first term tells me that there is a possibility and the historical example that Jalil Saab gave us from 2004 to 2007 also tells me that after vicious periods in the bilateral relationship, the 2003 ceasefire agreement, Jalil Saab would bear me out, came after a particularly violent period between India and Pakistan. You had the nuclear test, you had Kargil, you had parliament attack, and you had several issues thereafter until about 2003 or so. And then you had the ceasefire agreement. And then in 2004, we started negotiating a deal that would have changed the phase of the subcontinent, the geopolitics of the subcontinent. But unfortunately, it couldn't have happened because of various things that happened in 2007. But so I would say, don't focus too much on the domestic politics. I think, in my opinion, as an analyst, I would say, even in the most difficult of circumstances, there is a way of getting around some of these very complicated issues. And as Jalil Saab pointed out in his earlier intervention, the way I think forward at this point of time is to sort of put a lot more energy and effort into the back channel dialogue. That's probably the only way ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jacob. And I think you rightly pointed out that we have achieved some really good results even soon after the crisis. And probably that was the hope that perhaps India-Pakistan would realize the risks and engage coordinate for some positive engagement post Balakot. But unfortunately, we did not see that happening right after, because the risks really were really higher and stakes really were really higher. With that, I would request Ambassador Jilani to take the last question from Mr. Vikas, who says that who is asking that India-Pakistan consider Ladakh to be part of the Jammu and Kashmir state. Since China is claiming Ladakh to be part of Tibet, how will India-Pakistan be able to solve the Kashmir dispute insofar as Ladakh is concerned? Because China does not believe Ladakh has anything to do with Kashmir. Rather, they believe Ladakh to be part of the Tibet. So how do you see, basically this also alludes to China become party to this Kashmir problem. So how do you, if you can quickly respond to that, because we are moving close to the time, sir.
Well, the short answer is that we need to resolve Jammu and Kashmir dispute between India and Pakistan, because otherwise the situation will get more complicated for both the countries. The recent events involving the Chinese-India tension in Gulwan also underscores the importance of resolving these disputes in a peaceful fashion rather than through wars and tensions, because that's the only way to move forward. I would agree with him that India-Pakistan dispute on Kashmir has been a bilateral dispute since 1948, and it still is. But then certainly with the new kind of situation developing, China is also emerging as a third party to this dispute. But then again, it's important that we need to resolve this dispute as quickly as possible to the satisfaction of the Kashmiris, as well as people of India and Pakistan.
Thank you, Ambassador Jilani, for your quick response. There are still few questions that I've received in the question and answer box, and there are some that we are receiving through email. But unfortunately, we are reaching the closing time, and I would stop here and thank you very much to all the panelists. I think we have lost Ms. Hena Rabanikar from the speakers list. I guess she has lost the connection perhaps, but I really want to thank all the speakers for this very, very interesting discussion. Thank you, Dr. Jacob, Ambassador Jilani, and Ms. Hena Kar for giving your time to us for this very, very timely and important session. With that, I would turn to the Deputy President CAS, Air Marshal Farhad Hussain Khan, for his closing remarks. Over to you, sir, please.
Thank you very much. First of all, let me thank the honorable panel for a very candid discussion and their opinion. And what we all understand, India-Pakistan relations are marred with tensions and rivalry. The reasons are galore. We do not need to go into that because we stick to our subject that has been given to us by moderator. What has happened recently in the last few years, we've had elections in both the countries where Modi came in back after the re-election with a philosophy which was different more or less from the previous governments. This time, he is more inclined towards the RSS philosophy rather than his predecessor, that is Mr. Vajpayee's philosophy that our honorable ambassador described as Insaniyat and Jamhuriyat. On the Pakistan side, we have a new face, that is Imran Khan, who right from the beginning has always referred to all the issues to be resolved in a peaceful manner. He's against wars. He doesn't want to be part of any war. So that's why he says, if one step is taken by the Indian government, I will take two steps. But unfortunately, he's not going to take that because he did not find an equal response from that side. The next thing that happened that really brought us to a stage where small exchange of air power took place, that is Pulwama, an unfortunate incident that did escalate. Followed by that, there was a decision by the Indian government, particularly the BJP, which I believe was opposed by some of the people, politicians in India. That is abrogation of Article 35A and 370, which changed the whole scenario towards the negative side. It brought in a wave of miseries to the people of Jammu and Kashmir in specific, and those of India and Pakistan in general. Of course, recently we had a good development, as appreciated by all speakers. That is the ceasefire agreement that took place between the two DGMOs. A positive step, surely. The question now is, from where do we go from here from this positive step? As our honorable ex-foreign minister, she talked of a smart diplomacy, take out problems from the basket as a way forward, but he was clearly saying that he's not optimistic about the situation, because unless the Indian government moves forward on restoring the status of Jammu and Kashmir, or at least takes a step forward in that direction, things are not going to work out for both countries. On the subject, our honorable guest speaker from India, Dr. Jacob, was appreciative of the ceasefire. And that has brought in a fragile calm, as he says, and is a good start in his opinion. And I agree with him on this. It's a good start. He recommends moving from easy to difficult. Therefore, he said start with issues that can be resolved quickly, maybe trade, maybe Sir or other issues. He feels that there's no reversal of Article 370 or the state of Jammu and Kashmir back to its original state. That is where he also recommends some small steps like recovering the ambassadorial status of the two high commissions. Our Honorable Ambassador Gilani views that the issues between India and Pakistan are not insurmountable. And I agree with him. His logic is that there is if the leaders are bold and take bold decisions, take on difficult issues, not pray for the gallery, but work on issues, the issues can be resolved. And he is also of the opinion that we need to undo what has happened on the issue of Jammu and Kashmir. I feel with this summary of what has happened, I like to put a few questions or rather recommendations. I agree with our former foreign minister that situation, despite the fact that we have a ceasefire agreement, which is still not written, we do not see much progress coming our way, unfortunately, till we restore the status of Jammu and Kashmir, or at least start moving in that action. And let me say some easy step or relatively easy steps. We can start off with them, addressing the human rights issues there and reduce the misery of the people who are suffering for last so many years and more so in the last 2 years. And taking a positive step to stop the demographic changes that are planned in the Jammu and Kashmir by the Indian government as a result of abrogation of the status. Then, of course, work out the reinstatement of the special status of Jammu and Kashmir. And that will provide a ground for resolving the outstanding issues through a mechanism already agreed between the two sides a couple of decades back, that is the composite dialogue. The composite dialogue addresses all the issues. Yes, there could be a prioritization within that, but I think moving forward by resolving some of the human resource issues, human rights issues in Jammu and Kashmir, stopping the demographic changes and reinstating the issue will definitely help move forward. With that, I thank you all the guest speakers to join us at CAS for a very valuable input from your account, and we learn at CAS from your valuable support and input. And I thank you very much. Thank you, Stara.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Jacob, once again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Master Saab.
Thank you. Happy Mohans. Hope to see you soon.
In Pakistan and India.
Absolutely. As soon as COVID gets over, sir. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you all.